Welcome to the Young Crones Cafe, where you can get a magic brew full of all sorts of information, both witchy and practical.
Grab a cup of coffee and join us. I'm Elizabeth, a wordsmith.
And I'm Dave, a modern-day sage.
We are going to talk about various witchcraft and life topics from a slightly more mature perspective, at least most of the time.
Thanks for joining us.
Today's metaphysical kernel of thought is evolution of practices and beliefs. The idea of evolution involves the process of working out or developing something into something new and hopefully improved. While we have a tradition that we practice, it is not static. Our practices and beliefs are constantly developing simply from our interactions with others who have different subjective perspectives about anything we think, believe, or do. Change is not a negative thing when it comes to our spiritual practices. We study and learn constantly so that we can find new things to try out, adapt what we have been doing to use in different ways, or stop doing things that we may have done for a long time because they do not match what we currently believe. Our beliefs are also constantly evolving. By developing a regular spiritual practice, we have grown and changed and learned many new things, and also learned what doesn't work for us. Because of this, as we walk the path, our beliefs are subject to revision based on new information. For us, determining what we believe on a regular basis is important. Often, this process starts by figuring out what we don't believe and eliminating that first, before we work at defining our current beliefs. This process also leads to changes in the ways in which we practice, which leads to more questioning of belief, which leads to more changes in practice, which leads, you get the idea. While it can be a lot of work to craft an effective personal practice, we firmly believe that if we are not changing, we are stagnant or stuck. This does not keep us in harmony with the process of the universe itself, which is constantly evolving and changing, with or without our participation in the process. This makes it more difficult for us to connect with our own internal spark of the divine, and by extension, the external spark of the universe.
I kind of like this topic. It's one of those that it seems simple because it's not real long when you read it, and it's not real complicated in wordage, as it were, or verbiage, or however you want to say that. But there's kind of a lot packed in there.
Well, this particular topic and what we're going to have fun talking about tonight is, to me, more than just this idea of evolution of practice and belief, but it's become, to me, sort of a daily evolution of self.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, we're going to be able to really talk about the constant fluidity of change and how we are able to be more part of our environment when we are able to adapt more with our environment.
I think so. That's a good way to put it. I mean, when you think about it, you and I have been practicing more than 2 or 3 years because we're not spring chickens. I mean, I can remember first coming into the idea of a practice with witchcraft, and it was Wicca. And of course, I'm all by myself, so this is the 90s, and I am reading anything I can get my hands on, and a lot of it was crap. Let's be honest. A lot of the stuff that was written in the 90s was crap, and it's fun to look back at it now, historically, as it were, as, from my perspective, and say, my God. And then I found a real Wicca group and was kind of on the periphery of that for a while, hoping to be invited to join the coven, et cetera, and that didn't work out, but I did make friends. And after I didn't get accepted, for want of a better word, in full membership, this particular group of people left and invited me to join them, because for them, the Wicca they were experiencing didn't answer all their questions either.
Okay.
Because that group was very light focused. And we started asking, but you have to have dark in order to have light. And we went down some interesting darker trails, i.e., Chumley and a whole bunch of other stuff, and kind of had figured out that what we really needed was balance between, for want of a better word, for the first time, you know.
Sure.
And then over the next few years, we practiced on and off with some people, and then it just kind of turned into Sue and I, and we had a lot of fun experimenting and trying out different things, and eventually ended up, for want of the better word, with the path, all capital letters. That was very rudimentary, but it was ours, and we're like, okay, we're going to try stuff and figure it out what we mean by our path. And while we each had our own individual practices and paths, we kept coming back to each other and saying, but there's stuff we want to try together.
Sure. And you were meant to practice together, and you were meant to write together. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I think so. But we
It's
also,
interesting. It's interesting to hear that process of your evolution, and through all of those different versions and different interactions with people and whatnot. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of my background as well. But back to the topic of seeing these things as an evolution, we are always sort of seeking and changing and looking for something that helps us feel better and feel more a part of the world that we're walking around in.
I think so.
I mean, from my background, the first sort of Wicca exposure that I had was like Cunningham, and it was all solitary, and it was about forming my own correspondences and doing my own work with the elements and with the moons and whatnot. And so I've always had a fascination with covens. I've enjoyed being around a few different covens, but goodness, no, it has not once ever occurred to me to be full-time as a member or something declarative like that, because the more shamanist side of me says that I am an entity, sort of not necessarily an island, but unto myself, and my spirituality is purest when I am connecting with source or connecting with universe. And that when I include a bunch of human interactions, while I love the fact that there is a bunch of big sustained energy that results from groups of people, I'm more the drum circle kind of person, where it's energy that's raised and you can focus it where you want to focus it yourself as a participant, but not necessarily on a group or a themed thing. So my finding my way here onto the path, it's just really neat that I'm able to acknowledge that I've come from, I spent some time studying Buddhism, and I spent some time studying Taoism. And so for me, here again, it's been about me as an individual with my spirituality, and then how can I use that connection to make gifts to the world around me. So that evolution for me has been literally, and we talk about it here a little bit later, but it has literally been a cycle of rebirth and rediscovery and redefinition, to the point now where, quite honestly, this is a part of my morning daily routine. There is a part of me that wakes up the morning and makes a decision, based on what I want to practice today, and how I want to define my beliefs, how it is that I want to define the man that I am, or the human that I am. So this evolutionary practice can get right down to the micro level, where each morning when we're blessed to be able to wake up, we have choices about what we're going to do with that day.
Oh, I think so. I think for me and for Sue, when we created the rituals that we use together, like when we celebrate Ingress, Congress, Egress for the times of the cross quarter time,
Right.
every time we do them, there's both a familiarity and a gift of newness. If that makes-
Absolutely. I can see that. Sure.
Because
We have
what
done this
I-
together, but not this way.
yeah, and part of it is, okay, say it's Candlemas, and that occurs like January, early February, for anybody who doesn't know that. We do that series of 3 rituals. It's the same rituals. And we have in between whatever ritual, the 3, there's always a longer period between, like, say, between 1 and 2 or between 2 and 3. And wherever the longer period is, we celebrate by doing a times of contemplation and creation, where she and I are apart, and we have something we do every day that's the same thing that we do, but we do them individually. And we're probably not doing them at the same time, but we come back together for egress, and then we have the times of creativity that go with that, and we have a list of things that we do separately again. But when we do those 3 rituals together, yes, it's the same words, but if you think about it, from Candlemas to Candlemas, we are different people.
Absolutely.
So it is like doing a brand new ritual every single time in that respect.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
From year to year, you are different people. Absolutely.
I hope so.
And
Otherwise, I missed the point.
that brings me back to just to quote the reading. This process also leads to changes in the ways in which we practice, which leads to more questioning of belief, which leads to more changes in practice, and you get the idea.
Yeah.
The concept, and I think you actually just wrote about this the other day, but the concept of needing to reawaken or refresh, some of your practice or some belief or whatever. The idea of getting stuck really resonated to me, because we've all been in that place where we've felt stagnant, or in some cases we haven't felt that way until we realized it, but we were stagnant as far as our practice and our spirituality, or even faded and not bothering. We go through times like that. We're humans and we have busy modern lives.
Oh God, do we ever?
But you know what I mean? But
yeah, I do.
the fact that we evolve through these changes and find a way to still connecting, are still working and practicing to make those connections from our spark to the universal spark, and the whole idea of doing something for yourself continues to start to get traction and get that cycle moving again. The point that I wanted to make here is that the universe, whether you want to look at it as a wheel or a cycle or wave or what have you, it continues on with or without our intention and without our participation. So those are those times where when we get stagnant, or we get stuck, that we need to remind ourselves that it's going to continue to go on, and what we are doing is simply making our ride in that journey that much more difficult.
Yeah. I have always claimed that humans don't like change, number 1. And number 2, change goes on whether we participate or not. And the uncomfortable feelings that relate to our relationship with change is usually our resistance to it.
Sure, but uncomfortable is where we grow.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean people like it.
Yeah, okay. I've learned to.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Let us be honest. Some of those greatest changes where we've grown spiritually, when they're happening, it is freaking uncomfortable. We don't know what our next step is going to be, or the belief.
Like losing a family member. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or
Yeah,
those
I'm a different human being now. Sure.
Yeah. Or those beliefs that we thought we'd finally figured it out and we were comfortable with it. And we woke up on a Tuesday and all of a sudden we realized, hell, that's not what I believe anymore. So everything's out of whack.
Well, and that's one of the things that you mentioned earlier on in this particular writing is sometimes the easiest thing to do, or the easiest change, I should say, that we can identify is, all right, what is not working?
Yeah. What don't we
What
believe
is
in?
what is not doing it for me? You know, if burning that incense at this time of day isn't really giving me joy, then why am I burning incense or that incense at that time of day? And
Yeah.
and is this serving me and bringing me joy today, regardless of whether or not it has for the last dozen days in a row? Is this what I want to be doing with my time?
Exactly. And
There's an interesting Buddhist take that I heard from a YouTuber the other day, and it was
Mhm.
just the way that the lady explained essentially mindfulness or being present. And she says Buddhist is just very simply, what are you doing at this moment right now? What are you doing? And whatever it is that you are doing, do it, and do it well, and do only it. You know what I mean? And so there's a real synergy to that with constantly redefining our beliefs and relearning what doesn't work and what does work. You could equate it to riding a bicycle, in the fact that you learn how to keep this thing upright and moving forward at a reasonable pace.
It's weird because you start thinking about it.
Well,
And
I'm having the thought, really, that is it possible to not evolve in your practice or beliefs? You know, what would be an example of,
there
oh,
are,
I'm sorry, but I've led myself into the obvious joke of Catholicism. I'm sorry, but yeah, that,
Mhm.
to a certain extent, you could say that's what happens if you want to doctrinize your practices and beliefs and then just simply repeat them for 2,000 years with no reevaluation. And I don't mean to pick on that particular organized religion, but
No, it's a
the
very good,
the model is there, so to speak.
yeah, and it's kind of a good example, and
And you could argue now, especially with modern popes and some of the modern influences and whatnot, you could argue that the church itself is evolving. You know, and I'm not saying it hasn't changed, but some of the dogma seems to be persistent.
yeah, exactly. They're not, I think it's because they expect the people to adapt to the dogma and not the other way around.
Right, right,
And
absolutely.
I think that's
It's the same. It's the same thing, really. At the bottom of the issue, it's the same thing with the Constitution.
yeah, it is. And
It really
you know,
is.
okay, well, that's why we're allowed to amend it, supposedly.
The
Unfortunately,
document should follow with the needs of the nation, not the other way around.
yeah, well, yes, and we'll just leave that one alone because you and I promised we would not get into politics.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I consider myself swatted.
No, I'm not swatting at you. It's just, we're already discussing religion, which upsets some people. Let's not put politics in the middle of it. You and I do really well when we stick to one or the other. It's when we put them together that things get a little heated somehow.
Yeah, well, I think that might have something to do with our generation. But anyway,
Quite possibly.
my
like to think-
generation is also part of the evolution of my practices and beliefs. I mean, they have come
Mhm.
full circle a couple of times. Yep.
Well, sure, but people have to recognize that we all come in to paganism or witchcraft initially with a set of practices and beliefs. Whether we recognize that we still carry some of that with us or not.
Sure.
And it takes learning to adapt, that there's nobody that's going to tell you this is wrong, that you're not doing it right. And you have to figure out then, what do I do? And
Well,
for some people, that's scary as hell. That's why so many people cling to certain rituals, I think.
I just have to say that what that made me recall was the fact that if I go out tonight and it's a little smoky and hazy, so I probably can't. But if
Yeah.
I go out tonight and I look at particular stars, there's a
Mhm.
part of me that remembers looking at those particular stars when I was 11 in my backyard. And there's using those two fixed points as being the same person, the ability to look at the evolution of what I really believe to be real and to have value and to have meaning. I am glad to have followed the evolutionary path to be who I am today.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, that's the greatest. I think that's one of the biggest things that Sue and I always had so much fun with was trying new stuff all the time, just to see.
Well, that's just it. I mean, how cool are we going to be tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly. That's
know?
part of it. And the other part is you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure.
You know, there are certain parts of our rituals that we didn't change because they served the purpose. You know,
Absolutely.
we could change the opening chant, for want of a better word, that we say as we stand before the blessing table, where we have the four elements and we bless ourselves with the four elements.
But there's a blessing table. There
is
that is a fixed part of those particular rites that I've watched you guys practice through decades.
exactly.
Oh, there's our familiar. There's Susie in
Mhm.
cat form.
Exactly. And you keep promising to post pictures. I'm sure you will eventually.
Oh
But
my goodness, you caught me again.
yes, well,
All
make
right.
another note, add it
Well-
to your perpetual to-do list, and eventually you'll get to it. But the point I was trying to make was because of saying that blessing over and over, we literally trained our brains to recognize, oh, when we do this, something cool is going to happen.
Right.
We're going to step into magical space. So
Well,
it
you
is
know,
growth.
the example that I use, and it's actually just sort of funny, but after having burned charcoal for so long for incense, you would laugh at the number of times now that I will light the charcoal and I will set it in the sand and I will walk away and I will never put a shred of incense on it because my brain has been trained that the scent of the charcoal means I'm going to relax, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to reflect. And so really the charcoal now is my trigger.
Yeah, but we develop those.
Sure, absolutely.
To make. And we tried different ways of doing that over the years, but that one always worked. So stuff like that, we tend to be more quote unquote traditional about. And it's not that we're not open to different ways of doing it.
Well,
It's
that's just it. I mean, even the ICE cycles that you and I have done together, we have acknowledged that you and I as a practicing
duo.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are going to do things somewhat differently than you and Susie did, and acknowledging that is part of the evolution of that practice. There's
exactly.
there's no conflict or there's no karma or anything attached to that.
No, there isn't. And anybody who grabs any of our books that have some of our rituals in them, we always write at the beginning, at the end, and everywhere else that this is just our stuff. If you like it and you want to try it as we've written it, great. If you want to take pieces of it and write something else to put with it, do that. If you think
this is what worked well for us today, period.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, I'd be willing to bet if you and I are lucky to still be, practicing together and alive and reasonably healthy 10 years from now, what we do will be very different. I mean, some of the rituals that Sue and I have now are way less physically active than what we would have done, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Sure.
There's a lot less, circling around a giant area. We may circle the altar, but we're not going around the whole backyard more than once. And even then it takes longer because we want to make sure we don't trip.
So here's the thing. I still want to dance in a cornfield under the moon, naked and sky-clad, but the car's warm.
There you go. Yes. Or, I want to go outside and acknowledge that first snowfall, but I'd rather do it through the window because I don't want
It's pretty through glass. Yeah, it's pretty through the glass. Sure.
Through glass works fine sometimes. And that's okay too. That part of our evolution of our beliefs and practices is recognizing that we have a physical body that's coming along for the ride. And we have to be able to do rituals that we're enjoying the ritual and we're not focused on, oh my God, I'm going to fall on my ass.
Well, and this is about more than practices and beliefs too. I mean, it's evolution of relationships, evolution of self, evolution of values. I mean, it makes sense that if you don't feel like you are constantly evolving, please do something, anything different so that you can begin to feel that you are evolving.
Exactly. And
Even if you start like a daily walk or something like that. I started doing a little incense routine when I wake up in the morning. It's not actually incense, it's actually the scent of hot tea, but it's the thing that I'm doing to try to refresh that Zen pureness of morning.
Yeah, and you listen to yourself. It's a little bitty thing. When we say go out and do something, we don't mean, run a marathon.
Yeah.
Unless that's your thing.
Stand on the front porch for a minute.
It's those little bitty things. When you were talking about what I just wrote, it's in this month's monograph, and the idea is to do one little thing.
Yep.
Not anything big and complicated, and it should be something you enjoy.
Right.
And you have to, and sometimes when you are
something that you want to keep doing until you don't want to keep doing anymore, and then don't do it. Yeah.
Exactly. And then find something
That's
else.
evolution.
And then find something else that brings you that sense of joy. Or just breathe sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'm having one of those days and I'm like, I should be doing something. Then I remember I can take those 3 breaths, one for body, one for one for spirit, and it just changes everything.
Well, and the way, just from my kind of singular point of view, the way that I can look at it is I can take that moment and understand that, yes, the universe is continuing to revolve. Just for me right now, my place is to stand here and breathe.
Yeah.
And it's okay to let the universe catch up with me and let me catch up with the universe with this breath. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds like
evolution.
Yeah, evolution always. And sometimes it happens when we least expect it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing.
That's back to that change thing.
Yeah, back to that change thing. And
all
it's
right.
Okay. So that sounds like a really good place to wrap that up. Because that was a profound statement by both of us, and I can see us devolving.
Well, and it's interesting that we've both sort of described what our evolutionary path to this point has been, and also communicated the idea of everybody has theirs, and if you're not walking yours, well, here's your moment to say, hey, pick the cane up and let's hit the path for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. And I find it interesting that we come from such different places and can come here and have an understanding of each other.
Absolutely. Blessed be.
Exactly. So with that, may you find mirth and reverence in all things.
Be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Witch stones are a divination tool we created as part of our practice that deals with what we call concrete stones, specific types and kinds of energy, and conceptual stones, things and ideas about witchcraft, which can be read with either a seen or an unseen meaning. Recently, we have developed a set of oracle cards using this information. We would like to introduce you to one of these stones right now.
For today's Witchstone Spotlight topic, we'll review some of the more involved layouts and spreads that we can use to read or divine with our Witchstone's Oracle card deck. This moves beyond our basic single and 3-card layouts to those that capture a broader range of energies around specific events or periods in our life. Our book, The Witchstone's Oracle Companion, reviews more details about how to prepare yourself, your space, and your cards for a reading, and describes several different methods to help practice with and learn the cards themselves. Look for a link to purchase this book on Amazon by visiting our website at twoyoungcrones.com/library. Multiple card layouts often require more interpretation than a simple 1-card or 3-card layout, simply because there are more cards that you need to consider, and we're interpreting not only the cards, but how it is that they influence each other. The first larger reading that I will describe is a 12-card seasonal. On the winter solstice, or the first day of any of the other 3 seasons of the year, you can draw 3 cards for the 4 seasons. So you draw 12 cards, and what that looks like is you'll put them in a group so that you have winter at the top with a past, present, a body, mind, and spirit card. Then spring at the right side with a body, a mind, and a spirit card. Summer at the bottom with a body, a mind, and a spirit card. And autumn to the left with a body, mind, and spirit card. This gives us a total of 12 cards, although this can be simplified simply to 1 card for each of the 4 seasons and used as a 4-card. These cards are going to determine for you what energies are going to influence the different aspects of our life during the coming seasons. So, for example, body, mind, and soul in the spring gives you an idea of how those aspects of our lives are most likely to be impacted during the coming spring. The next major layout that I'm going to talk about is called a lunar reading, or 13 moons year in review. On New Year's Eve, instead of creating resolutions that most of us break by the end of January, why not draw 13 cards and arrange them in a circle to see what energies may influence each of the upcoming 13 lunar cycles? This is our lunar year in review and can shed some very deep insight into the energies that will be affecting us. Another, and one of my personal favorites, is a birthday or a personal year in preview. On your birthday, draw 13 cards, and in this case arrange 12 of them in a circle for the 12 months of your coming year, and the final card in the middle to represent your actual birthday. This will lead us to see what energies may influence us during each of the upcoming months of the year, as opposed to moons of the year in the lunar cycle. And the last that I'll describe today is called a Where Am I Now reading. We lay out 3 cards in the east, 3 in the south, 3 in the west, 3 in the north, and then 3 in the center for spirit. So at the top we have 3 cards for our earth elemental. At the right-hand side we have 3 cards for air. At the bottom we have 3 cards for fire. And to the left we have 3 cards for water. In the center of this circle we have 3 cards as well for spirit. The east cards correspond with the element of air, or thoughts and ideas, so they represent where your mind is now. The south cards correspond with the element of fire, personal will, so they represent where our energies are focused now. The west cards correspond with the element of water and of emotions, so they represent where our feelings are now. The north cards correspond with the element of earth and the physical, so they represent where our health is now. And the center cards correspond with the element of spirit, so they represent where your personal spiritual practices are at this moment. You can find diagrams for the readings that I've just described in the Witchstones Oracle Companion, and I said that is available on Amazon. Be safe, be kind, and be loved. Before we go, we would like to present you with a tip or trick or witchy hint. Just something to make your day go better, because we live in a mixture of the magical and the mundane.
Today's tip, trick, or witchy hint is all about remembering to have fun. We were talking in our discussion about the importance of finding the time to do something witchy every day, or that makes our spiritual practice feel more a part of our lives. I'm here to remind you that it's also important to have fun on the mundane level. It uplifts your body, mind, and spirit, which is important. By fun, I mean anything that brings you joy or makes you laugh. Watch cartoons with your kids. Take time to read a few pages of that trashy romance novel or mystery or fantasy book that you have that you enjoy. Go to a playground and swing on the swings, or go down the slide like you used to do when you were a kid. Blow bubbles and watch the breeze carry them away from you, and laugh. You could always Google witchy jokes on the internet, or dad jokes, or any kind of jokes, and read a few. The point is, find something that's fun on the mundane level and go do it. Like I said, it can uplift your body, mind, and spirit when you're stuck in the middle of all of those mundane responsibilities that we all have. For me today, I am going to put it on that oldie station that plays rock music from the 1980s, you know, the headbanging kind that has a really good beat, and play it and sing along, because I'm of that generation, as I'm driving to pick up kids today from whatever place they have to be. I've got one that's got to be at work this morning, and I think I'll play the music on the way home. The point is, it's just as important to have fun on the mundane level as it is in your spiritual practice. It will bring you joy. Joy is important. Joy on the mundane lifts your body, mind, and spirit, and it helps you maintain that balance between the magical and the mundane. If you're doing something fun on the mundane, you are more likely to want to engage in your spiritual practices anyway. So here's your reminder. Go and have fun today. It's important. We all need those moments of childlike joy in our lives. So until next time, go do something fun today.
Well, it looks like the coffee cups are empty for this week. We hope you join us again next Tuesday. But you can find us at our website, 2youngcrones.com. That's the number 2, Young Crones.
We'd love to have you join our growing online Discord community. Check out our new Patreon presence. Just look for Young Crones Cafe. Through Patreon, you'll be able to make it to our Discord. We are also Young Crones Cafe on Twitter and Facebook.
Until then, remember, we are witches who work with energies to effect change.
We are believers in both immanent and transcendent divine.
We are celebrants of the passage of the solar and lunar cycles.
We are hedge walkers who pass back and forth between the worlds of the magical and the mundane.
We are seekers of knowledge.
And we are walkers of a spiritual tradition we call the Path.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.